Hi, and welcome to this week's episode. We are going to dive into something that is described as the common contributor to every single chronic disease. And that is from diabetes to heart disease to autoimmune to dementia and even cancer. And so what is it? It is inflammation. If you know, I often talk about inflammation in many of our podcasts. You hear us talk about inflammation, but a lot of people have no idea really what inflammation is and how things in the body can actually cause chronic inflammation. Most people think of inflammation as like a sprained ankle. You sprain your ankle, the next day you wake up and it's swollen and it hurts and it's red, and that is inflammation. But we also can get stuck in a state of chronic inflammation. Chronic inflammation you often can't see. It's not going to hurt, but it's just like a little fire in the body that never goes out. And so we end up with all of these symptoms that can show up from chronic inflammation. So according to the CDC, a study done in 2023 using behavioral risk factor surveillance system found that 76% of United States adults, around 194 million, report having at least one chronic condition. 76% have at least one chronic condition. 51%, around 130 Americans, report having multiple chronic conditions. That is half of our population, half of the adult population, reporting at least two or more chronic conditions, and 76, basically 3/4 of the population, the adult population, reporting at least one chronic condition. That is a big problem. So it's really diving into what causes this, what can we do, and how does inflammation play a role? So first, what is inflammation? Inflammation is a natural response to something to protect us, right? So it's basically the body's internal alarm system that signals the right guys to go take care of an injury. So you cut your finger and you get some bacteria in there. The immune system is going to respond by sending white blood cells, cytokines, and other chemicals to fight off the infection and repair the tissue. That is inflammation. You roll your ankle again, you're going to wake up and it's going to be swollen, it's going to hurt. That's inflammation starting to get the body to heal there. If it's short term, that's great. That's what it's for. But as we get into these chronic phases, that's where the problem arises, right? So the alarm never gets turned off. So this chronic low-grade inflammation isn't like a swollen ankle. It's not big, it's not loud, but it's more slow, kind of that slow burn under the background or in the background that over time damages tissues and alters hormones and disrupts the mitochondria and our metabolism and even can turn on and off genes. And so we really have to figure out what could be causing this inflammation in us. A landmark study in Nature magazine called Inflammation, the Common Soil of Chronic Disease. And that is really what it is, right? Is the common denominator of chronic disease. Are there other factors? Absolutely. But inflammation tends to be there. So the first thing you often hear is that inflammation is bad, right? Inflammation is always bad, and that's not true. Inflammation itself is not the enemy. We have to have it. You get hurt, you get a cut. That's what the body needs to repair and to heal. But even a tough workout, you're going to have a little bit of inflammation, right? But the problem is when it doesn't go away. That is where the problem is. Inflammation in itself, we have to have it. It stimulates the healing and recovery process. When it doesn't go away is the problem. So think of it as a fire. If you had a fire in your fireplace, no problem. If it spreads to the whole house, you've got a big problem. So inflammation is the same way. If it's short term, if it's contained, great. It's going to do its job. It's going to stimulate everybody to come and heal and help heal and repair. But when it spreads, when it goes throughout the body, that's where we start to see issues. So let's look at, well, what causes inflammation, right? When you look at inflammation, people often talk about it, but they don't really go into detail about what causes it, what the culprits are. So what are some of these root causes of inflammation in the body? The first is one of the biggest drivers of things of issues within the body across the board is blood sugar and blood sugar imbalances. To be healthy, your blood sugar has to be in balance. That is just a fact. If you're dealing with high blood sugar, you're having low blood sugar, insulin resistance, things will start to be affected. You have to have your blood sugar in balance. And often people think that they don't struggle with it. Oh, I'm healthy. I eat well. There's no way I have blood sugar issues. Not exactly true. We know toxins can cause blood sugar issues, and we know chronic stress can do it. Often people are dealing with high stress lives, and high stress can cause blood sugar imbalances as well as certain toxins. So when your body is, dealing with high blood sugar from carbs or sugar or processed foods, your body releases insulin to basically get the glucose in to use it as fuel. And similar thing happens, right? When you have high stress, the body releases glucose and then you have to bring it down. Insulin brings it down. Over time, when your body is constantly high blood sugar dumping out insulin, what happens is the body stops responding. And so you get to a state called insulin resistance. And insulin resistance is kind of the precursor to diabetes, type 2 diabetes, because eventually you don't have the insulin sensitivity and blood sugar just keeps going up and up and up. The problem with insulin resistance, well, there's many of them, but one of the issues is insulin resistance is very inflammatory. They found in the Journal of Clinical Investigation that insulin resistance and inflammation form a vicious cycle. Elevated glucose levels lead to glycation, which is basically sugar molecules stick to the proteins and fats in your body, creating compounds called AGEs or advanced glycation end products. These AGEs trigger oxidative stress and damage our blood vessels. So just like when you caramelize sugar, it turns brown and sticky and thick, excess sugar in your bloodstream can brown your tissues, making them stiff, making them inflamed, and causing a whole other slew of problems. This is like why balancing your blood sugar is crucial. And it really gets into, yes, your diet has to be balanced, your stress has to be lowered, we have to move, all of these factors, but getting your blood sugar in balance is imperative. The next trigger of inflammation is toxins. So this is mold, metals, chemicals, pollutants, all of the toxins that we are exposed to, many of us on a daily basis. People often say, well, these are newer things. We didn't see 500 years ago, 200 years ago, people dealing with these conditions. And yes, a big piece of that is the toxic load that we have as a society. Yes, our ancestors were exposed to some toxins, but not nearly the amount of toxins that we're exposed to every single day. And so mold mycotoxins, whether it's in building or your food, mercury in your seafood, cesium in your seafood, lead from old pipes, pesticides, plastics, all of these toxins we are exposed to generally every single day. Your liver has to detoxify all of these toxins. It has to take them, break them down, and get them out of the body. But when the load is really high, you accumulate toxins, right? Your liver can't keep up with the massive amount of toxins that we're ingesting. So we start to accumulate these toxins. They will get into our cells, especially fat cells. Toxins love to sit in fat cells. And when these toxins linger, one, they're inflammatory. They cause inflammation. And two, they keep the immune system on high alert. So a lot of toxins, we look at molds, heavy metals, air pollution, particulates, they directly activate the immune system and they will lead to the production of inflammatory chemicals or cytokines, interleukin 6, TNF alpha, and again, trigger inflammation, right? They trigger an inflammatory cascade, inflammatory pathway. Then you have other toxins that aren't directly going to release these inflammatory cytokines, things like BPA, phthalates, pesticides. But what they do is they disrupt the hormones, they disrupt our mitochondrial function, they disrupt detox pathways, which in turn can promote low-grade inflammation and oxidative stress. So really all of these toxins somehow, some way set us up for having inflammation in the system. The next guy that is a big root cause is the gut health. And what does your microbiome look like? And so around 70% of your immune system actually lives in the gut. So when the gut is off, we often have inflammation that will spread everywhere. So when we have dysbiosis or imbalance of the gut flora, this can be with pathogens, this can just be too many of your own guys, too low of your own guys, some sort of imbalance in the gut microbiome, it can create an immune imbalance. And when these guys overgrow, when they get out of balance, they can actually produce toxins. The bacteria or parasites can actually produce toxins that irritate the gut lining. And when the gut lining is irritated, we will call this leaky gut. Leaky gut can also be triggered by really processed foods, from stress, but certain bacteria and parasites can produce toxins that can cause leaky gut as well. And so instead of your gut being tight, right, we think of our fingers locked together. When the gut lining is intact, nobody gets in, nobody gets out except for what's supposed to be there. But when you get leaky gut, the gut wall opens up, and now you can get what's supposed to be in your gut. You can get food particles, you can get bacteria actually get into the bloodstream, and this creates an inflammatory response. They are not supposed to be there, and so leaky gut can create an inflammatory response. A 2017 paper in Frontiers in Immunology called Leaky Gut the Gateway to Chronic Inflammatory Diseases. That's why we see so many symptoms, such as, that people often will call unrelated, but it could be brain fog, skin issues, joint pain, fatigue, all can come back to the gut. If your gut's not happy, the rest of the body is really not going to be happy. When we have leaky gut, one of the most important gut-derived triggers of inflammation is something called LPS. LPS is lipopolysaccharides, and LPS is a molecule that makes up the outer coating of a gram-negative bacteria. Gram-negative is just a category of bacteria. You have gram-positive, but gram-negative bacteria have this LPS molecule that makes up their outer coating. And so you can think of it as like their shell or their armor, per se. And so when you have LPS inside your gut, there's no issue. That's where they're supposed to be. But when you have leaky gut and the LPS get into the bloodstream, your immune system view it as a threat. And so what happens is LPS will actually trigger inflammation within the body because it's perceived as a threat. Even small amounts of LPS in your blood can switch on the immune cells and actually ramp up your inflammatory cytokines like TNF alpha, interleukin 6, and again, perpetuate the inflammatory cycle. This is called metabolic endotoxemia, and studies have linked it to insulin resistance, obesity, heart disease, brain fog, and depression. Another big factor of gut inflammation is through parasites. And before you tell me we don't have parasites here, we do. Go listen to my podcast on parasites. But parasites are extremely common around the world, even in the United States. And we pick them up from our pets. We pick them up from foods, so vegetables. We pick them up from sushi, from contaminated water, gardening and getting in the soil. Parasites are common. And when you get a parasite, doesn't matter really what type, it will set up shop in the gut or wherever it is in the body, and it creates a little bit of irritation. It can damage the gut lining. It can disrupt the bacterial balance and set us up for that dysbiosis. It can weaken the intestinal barrier or cause leaky gut. But one of the factors that parasites do that really can set us up for inflammation is they release byproducts, proteins and toxins that interact with the immune system. And so these byproducts will actually trigger those inflammatory cytokines, which then again sets us up for the inflammatory cycle. And they do this so that they can basically live rent-free and get the immune system off of them. They're pretty smart little guys, but what it does is they don't go away, right? So often parasites are there, and so we just have this low-grade inflammatory cycle going on in the gut from these parasitic infections. So whether it's from the tissue irritation, the barrier damage, the immune activation, it all sets us up for chronic inflammation in the gut. And just like with leaky gut or the LPS toxins, that inflammation doesn't always stay local. It really can start to spread through the body. And so you can end up with brain fog, joint pain, skin issues, all again stemming from the gut. The next root cause of inflammation, and this one people don't like to think of as a cause, is chronic stress. Chronic stress can be a huge problem for people, and it's a lot harder to deal with because it's not, oh, just take that supplement or go, fix your foods. It's a lot harder than that. So when we are stressed, we release cortisol. Cortisol is our stress hormone, stress response. And it's actually really an anti-inflammatory hormone when it's in balance. But with chronic stress, your cortisol gets disrupted, right? The balance doesn't stay how it should. You should wake up, it should spike, and then it should gradually lower throughout the day. But when we get in a dysregulated state, high stress, we're often producing way too much cortisol, or after a while, you produce too little cortisol because you can't sustain that level of cortisol production. So, when you're stuck in a state of chronic stress, we stay in a sympathetic dominant state. That is fight or flight. And a 2012 review in PNA showed that chronic stress actually changes your gene expression, turning on the pro-inflammatory genes and turning down the anti-inflammatory ones. So for gene expression, being in a state of chronic stress actually sets you up for having the genes for pro-inflammation, turning on the inflammatory genes turn on, and the guys that protect you, your anti-inflammatory genes, they get turned down. So you really have to, for health, you have to figure out ways to balance your stress response. Most people aren't going to get their stress to zero, right? We have kids, we have finances, we have jobs, we have all of these factors that can set us up for being in a state of stress. It's what do you do in the day-to-day to actually get your nervous system to regulate? And so doing things like breath work, meditation, journaling, going out and being in nature, finding ways to get your nervous system to calm down so that you don't stay in just that chronic state of go, 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 high stress, high stress, high stress. The other thing to look at is hidden infections. And so these are things that aren't exactly tested for commonly, and they can kind of just linger in the background. So these are chronic viral infections like Epstein-Barr or cytomegalo. This can be Lyme and its co-infections. So Borrelia, Babesia, Bartonella. It can be Mycoplasma. And these guys can hang out and just kind of lay under the radar and cause just a little bit of inflammation. And so they keep the system on high alert, right? There's a problem, but it's not going away. So just like parasites and bacteria can release proteins and toxins, so can these guys. They can release these toxins into the body. They produce, we have inflammatory cytokines that are going to try to balance it. But again, you just get into the state of chronic inflammation. These hidden infections aren't often looked for, and if you've kind of exhausted all other avenues, then starting to look at some of these deeper infections, such as Lyme, Mycoplasma, cytomegalo can be the next step in seeing, are these the things that are really taxing the body and causing low levels of inflammation? Another culprit for inflammation, and it's kind of the obvious one, is poor diet and lifestyle. This is really, I feel like most people know this, but it is probably the biggest factor. It really goes in with blood sugar, especially if your blood sugar is purely from a dietary standpoint. It is crucial. The standard American diet is high in sugar, high in refined carbs, processed meat, seed oils, low in fiber, not a lot of nutrients. It's inherently very pro-inflammatory. Prospective cohorts and trials found that women who ate a pro-inflammatory diet had a significantly higher risk in developing chronic disease compared to those who ate anti-inflammatory patterns. But it's not just food, it's sleep deprivation. We know that sleep deprivation can raise your C-reactive protein, which is a marker of inflammation. We know that sedentary behavior increases inflammatory cytokines. We know that moderate exercise lowers them. We add in alcohol, smoking, poor hydration, and you really set yourself up for systemic inflammation. So the first and most important thing, it definitely goes hand in hand with blood sugar, is that we have to eat well. We have to have our body eating well, recovering well, sleeping well, being hydrated to start to nip the inflammation. So if you're concerned with inflammation, you have to ask why, right? And all of those root causes are the things you want to examine. But here's some labs you can ask your doctor to run to get a clue. So we've got high sensitivity CRP. This is a systemic inflammation marker. We've got homocysteine. Homocysteine is linked to cardiovascular and neurological inflammation. We've got the cytokine panels, and then deeper testing, right? Doing stool testing to see what's going on in the gut, doing toxin testing to see are there any toxins, and then if you need to go deeper, doing testing to look for these stealth infections. If you can lay out everything going on in the body and figure out what is there that doesn't belong, what needs to be adjusted, what needs to be tweaked, then you can start to make a game plan and start to lower the inflammation through cleaning up the body. All of us have things that we can do to clean up our body and help. It's just figuring out what your pieces of the puzzle are and going from there. So the big things are, one, diet and balancing your blood sugar. Those guys have to be in check. And again, I say this pretty much every time we talk about blood sugar. To be healthy, we have to have this in check. But we want to eat protein with every meal. We want to avoid refined carbs, watch sugar, and looking at CGMs to see what is your blood sugar doing over a 24-hour period. We want to work on healing the gut. See if there's infections and work on getting the gut lining back. We want to manage our stress. We want to sleep. We want to move. These are crucial for starting to get your inflammation back in check. And then again, going deeper if those guys don't do it. So inflammation really isn't the enemy. It's the signal that something deeper is going on, and we have to find what that is. So it doesn't mean that you're going to get X, Y, and Z. It just means, hey, your body's waving a red flag. Let's figure out what we need to do to identify it and start to either remove it, balance it, heal it, go from there. But inflammation is just telling us something is wrong. All we have to do is find it. So thank you very much, and I will see you guys next week.